Quickly the situation had escalated. It had only been 3 days since he had first observed the signs. He knew that his reincarnation granted him foreknowledge, but cases were already being reported in the west, east, and even some southern regions. It appeared the epidemic was spreading far faster than even his memories suggested. Turning to his companions, he inquired about the state of their home villages. Asha reported that, thankfully, her hometown remained calm, and Sa confirmed the same for her own village. Errol found this odd, knowing that Sa's homeland was right in the heart of the outbreak zone, yet her village was the sole exception, completely untouched. He'd heard that not a single person there had fallen ill, which made him wonder if some unique genetic factor was at play. He immediately issued orders to his subordinates, closed the gates, and enforced a strict quarantine. He also grimly acknowledged that because of this accursed plague, all commerce and travel throughout the nation was now completely paralyzed. It was a tragic but necessary turn of events. Errol declared that they would proceed according to his pre-established plan, stating that if his calculations were correct, the medicine he had prepared in advance would be sufficient. All other projects in Philia were to be put on indefinite hold. Their sole focus now had to be combating the epidemic. An antibiotic wasn't a cure-all for every ailment, but fortunately, this world had the advantage of healing magic. Errol instructed the head wizard to mobilize every available mage for treatment, believing they could potentially halt the epidemic in its early stages. If their numbers proved insufficient, they were to request aid from Hellman. Still, another oddity troubled. The prince realized that a natural epidemic should take months to spread this far, yet this one had engulfed the land in a matter of weeks. His suspicions fell on one person, Saint Nine. She was the most likely culprit behind this disaster. Though no one else knew it, she possessed the terrifying ability to manipulate diseases. Just as this thought crossed his mind, there was a sharp knock on his door. He bid them enter, and it was Dia, who had come to discuss the very same matter. The young woman began, "I have a pressing question for you, Sir Errol. Did you know in advance that this epidemic was coming? And if so, is it possible this plague was created? Artificial?" Through her healing efforts, she had come to a startling realization. This disease felt chillingly familiar. Errol immediately became guarded, wondering if she could possibly be referring to that time-specific plague. The enchantress confirmed his fears, stating that this illness was disturbingly similar to the one that had once devastated her own hometown. When the prince pressed her, asking if she was certain it wasn't a mistake, the young woman confirmed her fears. The haunting images of people perishing from this plague were seared into her memory, along with the agonized expressions of her friends and family. She looked at him and asked directly, "Tell me the truth. Was this disease engineered by—" The prince's solemn nod was all the confirmation she needed. Having heard the terrible truth, Dia prepared to take her leave, stating she wouldn't trouble him any further and offered her thanks. But before she could depart, Errol stopped her with a crucial reminder. "I will not let the perpetrators get away with this," he declared, his voice firm. "You must understand that." She acknowledged and then shut the door behind her. Shortly after, the prince departed in his carriage, heading towards the very heart of the disaster, the city that marked the epidemic's ground zero. His guide warned him, "It's perilous here, Your Highness." This town was completely abandoned after the mass evacuation of its residents. The prince, however, remained unfazed, assuring him there was no need for concern, as he possessed a magical talisman for protection. "If you are afraid," he added, "you may turn back." But the man firmly stated that retreating was simply not an option, explaining that this was his hometown. Errol acknowledged his resolve, but noted, however, there is someone else here who should certainly head back to safety. He then opened a compartment beside him, revealing Fina hidden inside. The first words out of her mouth were an apology for stowing away without permission, but she explained that after hearing what Dia had revealed, she simply could not stand by and do nothing. "Prince," she pleaded, "I must see this new spirit you contracted with. Now, I can heal people too, even if only on a fundamental level." The prince sighed, a hint of sorrow in his voice, and questioned if she was truly a member of the royal family. It was becoming difficult to pretend he was oblivious to her secrets and to compel others to maintain the charade. Shaking it off, he urged them, "We need to move. We still have a mountain of critical work ahead of us." As they traveled, the prince inquired if the villages that had undergone the brutal containment measures had been spared from the outbreak. His guide confirmed they were, as everything had been carried out according to the official decree. Errol grimly recalled that the usual response to an epidemic was to incinerate the entire village, a brutal method born from ignorance of the disease's cause and the exact mechanism of its transmission. After a moment of contemplation, he turned to Dia and asked her to attempt the method they had discussed. She agreed without hesitation and immediately began to channel her power, explaining the process as she worked. The prince watched intently, stating, "If this succeeds, there will be no more need to burn villages." The local man stared in astonishment. The skill she was invoking was 7th-grade nanoparticle control, an incredibly advanced ability. Due to its high-level requirements, its application was severely limited. Fina, sensing the immense surge of energy, asked what was happening. She was told that the virus itself was being eradicated, but that this method would only be effective against this specific strain. The protagonist understood that this was an unorthodox approach, but he was left with no other choice. A short while later, he prepared an indicator to test the air for any remaining trace, and after the test was complete, it was reported that the indicator's color remained unchanged. It appeared that every last trace of the virus in the vicinity had been utterly destroyed. Dia confirmed their success, but admitted that the effort had consumed a great deal of her strength, and she could now barely remain standing. Just as Errol had predicted, cleansing an entire village required a colossal expenditure of energy. He praised Dia for her incredible effort and urged her to rest. The local man, his voice trembling with hope, asked if the plague was truly gone. The prince confirmed that this specific virus would not return, giving this land a chance to be reborn, but he cautioned that they must not let their guard down just yet. Despite the warning, the man was overcome with relief and joy, profusely thanking the prince, and so, the fight continued. The battle against the disease raged on. Even with Fina now cured, Dia continued to unleash high-level magic as mass immunizations commenced. The prince was consumed with worry over whether their medicinal supplies would be sufficient, but he was quickly reassured that they had more than enough. In fact, the surplus was entirely thanks to him, and the residents showered him with gratitude for everything he was doing. The high fevers and alarming mortality rate were the terrifying hallmarks of the epidemic sweeping the settlement, but thanks to the efforts of Errol and his team, the epidemic was miraculously stopped in short order. This news reached Nenia very quickly, and she found the entire situation profoundly strange. She thought it was impossible. There was no way even Arnesia could have avoided catastrophic casualties in a plague of this severity. Yet, the reports claimed fewer than 100 deaths. The girl knew she had selected the most effective remedy, so she couldn't fathom what had gone wrong. For 130 years, humanity had been helpless, so how could Errol have done it? It was as if he had been reborn with the answer already in hand. If that was the case, it was time to move urgently to Plan B. She would have to approach this problem from an entirely new angle. Ultimately, this unexpected development played right into her true goal. A girl simply must seize such a chance, as there's no telling when another will appear. An opportunity like this was a rare blessing, with no guarantee that such luck would ever smile on her again, and it was all for the sake of the future. Back in the Holy Kingdom, the priests discussed how the saint's prophecy had failed to come true, leaving Eresia completely unharmed. Not a single bit of harm had come to them. It was entirely unclear what this failure meant now, and in the end, they never even launched their offensive. Serious doubts had arisen about whether the holy divine revelation had ever been genuine. Meanwhile, Errol continued his journey in his carriage. He rejoiced, for at last the crisis was on the wane. The rest of the work could now be entrusted to others, and he could finally get some rest. As he relaxed, he pondered Nenia, that hypocritical woman who pretended to be merciful. He thought to himself, just let her wait. He swore that in this life, after his reincarnation, he would be the one to finally overthrow her. The boy's intense musings were interrupted by Fina turning to him. He asked her what was on her mind. The princess mentioned that she wished to speak about the incident, but then she suddenly hesitated. She faltered and claimed it was nothing. In the end, they simply arrived safely in Philia. Now, our hero was sitting alone. In his room, he realized that while he had kept quiet, the princess was far too perceptive. He suspected she might have guessed something. Perhaps her connections in the right circles gave her insight, or maybe she noticed something suspicious while reading the correspondence. The letters exchanged between Merman and the Holy Kingdom were no longer checked, as the Empire could not harm them anymore. Suddenly, it dawned on him that a pivotal event was set to occur today. It became unclear just how long Fina intended to hide it from him, and just as he thought, the girl had received it. The letter from her brother, Fen, had finally arrived. Fen's official reason for being in Philia was to study, which gave her every right to exchange letters. However, the Empire had cleverly used this cover to its own advantage. They employed a unique method in which the letter's true contents are only revealed when the blood of a specific person is applied to the page. It was a rather intriguing way to send secret messages. Fina wondered what her brother had written to her this time. The letter stated that news of her had reached him. She had moved to Philia, into a domain belonging to Prince Errol. He called it quite an impressive accomplishment, especially, he added with a sting, for someone as inept as her. The Emperor hopes that her has not been discovered yet. The girl's heart sank as she realized it had already been exposed. She was even receiving lessons for it in elemental magic. Furthermore, her brother's letter stated that their alliance with the Holy Kingdom was steadily growing stronger. He was already plotting to avenge his past humiliation, counting on Minia's assistance. The princess recognized the name. This woman was her brother's consort, hailing from the Holy Kingdom itself. Minia appeared to hold significant influence there, and her brother harbored a deep-seated hatred for Arnesia. Returning to the letter, he had warned her to be discreet, ensuring her rare talents weren't exposed, especially given her recent reincarnation into this new life. At that moment, the princess couldn't help but wonder what he truly thought of her elemental magic. She recalled how, upon first summoning Sally, everyone present had reacted with pure horror. Her brother's reaction was no different, yet she used this very magic to save lives, so it was unclear why they all responded with such fear. However, the next passage Fina read left her utterly speechless. She couldn't comprehend how any of this was even possible. It was simply unthinkable that her own brother would conceive of such a monstrous act. After absorbing this devastating information, she immediately bolted from her chambers and raced through the halls, her destination clear. She was heading straight for Errol. Seeing her distress, the first thing the hero asked was why she looked so terrified and what had happened. He urged her to calm down and explain everything from the beginning. His distraught companion simply held out the letter clutched in her hand, pleading with him to read it before they spoke further. The prince recognized it as a clandestine message, one practically dripping with contempt for him. It felt profoundly awkward to even be reading it. But then, just like Fina, his expression shifted to one of utter shock, as he struggled to grasp the sheer madness of the contents. Turning to the princess, he asked in disbelief, Does he, Emperor Merman, truly believe this is a viable plan? He intends to sell his own people into servitude to the Holy Kingdom for a pittance. Meanwhile, the very man they were discussing was still with his wife. He declared that not only his father, the late emperor, but the entire empire had always been vexed by Arnesia. How could anyone acknowledge a nation founded by a mere commoner who proclaimed himself emperor 500 years ago? This was why he was so indebted to the Holy Kingdom and his wife. Ramia then asked, but isn't that incredibly dangerous? Even if your people agree, countless lives could be lost. The emperor replied, if it helps the empire to be **** reborn **** and wash away its shame, the citizens will surely understand. Even if our population of laborers decreases, we will not be able to compensate for the losses until after we have utterly crushed the Arnesian Empire. There was only a single rebellious vassal who dared to defy me, but now, everything is under control, so you have nothing to worry about. She offered a faint smile and remarked that His Majesty was exceptionally wise, and his ancestors would undoubtedly be proud of him. Back with Errol, Fina insisted that the brother she knew would never commit such an atrocity on his own. She was certain it was the influence of his consort from the Holy Kingdom. The hero questioned if the emperor was truly so easily swayed by a wife from a foreign. The princess confirmed it, explaining that her brother was utterly enthralled by this woman. He not only allocates vast funds for the construction of churches for the Holy Kingdom, but it was also at her insistence that Fina herself was exiled here. This, unfortunately, was the first time the prince was hearing of this detail, and he could hardly believe it. First, her brother was buying holy water at 3 times the market price out of pure pride, and now, he's so desperate for funds that he's willing to sell his own citizens. If this path continues, the empire is surely doomed to collapse, and even if it survives, it will be completely subservient to the Holy Kingdom. Yet, the prince still didn't understand why Fina was telling him all this. The plight of the empire's citizens was concerning, of course, but he and his own people had more than enough problems of their own. In this situation, his only move was to observe, figuring she was probably not foolish enough to miss the subtext. Hearing this, Errol deliberately provoked her, wondering what she would say, and the woman he was speaking to asserted that this was his problem as well. She recalled meeting the saintess back when her brother's marriage was being discussed, and that's when she remembered Sally's warning to stay away from this man. The princess understood this whole bizarre chain of events, including the epidemic, was connected to the Light Kingdom, which meant she and Errol now had a common enemy. The young man retorted that it simply wasn't enough. It was unclear why he should go out of his way to help a foreign nation. Fina pleaded that he help her reclaim her status as ruler, and then she would find a worthy way to repay him. The hero was back, wondering if she was actually planning to sell her empire to him. The princess insisted it was better in his hands than to let the current disaster continue. She was sure that he wouldn't stand by and allow the mass death of her people. Errol noted her directness and asked what else she was willing to propose. The girl then played her final card, and the prince couldn't believe that this was it. Fina was flustered in that moment and cried out that if he wanted her, she was willing to be reborn as his. This was a development Errol hadn't expected in the slightest, and he was stunned by where this had come from. After a moment's thought, he decided to take advantage of the situation, so he offered a slight smile and said if she was that insistent, it must mean she was fine with him taking his payment right away. He'd like to see if she was truly resolute in her decision. The girl was taken aback by this, but she agreed anyway, stating that she was ready. Then the hero gently touched her head and told her to stop as he was about to burst with laughter. It's not like he was some kind of fiend to make such a demand. He had intended to help her from the very start, and he found her incredibly naive. The girl became enraged and she was willing to follow instructions. Fina, looking confused, asked what he meant. The prince simply said that he had taught her elemental magic so that she could finally confront the Holy Kingdom using their own doctrines, a strategy reborn from their hypocrisy. The time had come for the holy to be purged. He required no political advantage and already commanded sufficient business in the city, so his reasons for offering aid were obscure, but he could not assist her without something in return. Therefore, once her empire was re-established, she would be required to open official trade relations with. Fina asked if that was truly all. Aurella confirmed, stating that a stable source of income was his only goal. Power, he believed, was overrated, but wealth was truly priceless. The princess observed that he had spoken with such gravity before, making his current attitude all the more perplexing. The man couldn't discern whether she was disappointed or had genuinely hoped for that very proposition. Over at the orphanage, the children were absolutely delighted to see her. The holy saintess Nenia greeted them with a radiant smile, remarking to the children that they were so brimming with health. In a world where natural disasters and monster attacks were frequent, a chance for these children to be reborn into a safe life was the ultimate priority of the survivors, but it was exceedingly rare to find a domain where the ruler themselves, with authority over an entire kingdom, personally saw to the welfare of the children. One woman remarked how wonderful it was that the children were growing up under the saint's benevolent gaze. At that moment, one of the boys ran toward, only to trip on an errant stone and fall. The saintess expressed her worry, gently asking him to be more careful while she, of course, healed the boy's scrapes with her divine magic. He shouldn't be feeling any pain now, she assured him. However, the boy sadly that the wine he had hoped to offer her had unfortunately spoiled. Nenia, however, kindly insisted it didn't matter, as she was already pleased with the gesture. She expressed her joy in seeing him grow into such a fine young man. The educator then offered his heartfelt thanks to the saint, admitting that if not for her, they would have ceased to exist. In fact, the Holy Kingdom only began actively supporting the orphanages after Saint Nenia took up political duties on behalf of the ruler. The woman continued, confessing she once lay awake at night consumed with worry over how to feed the children, remarking how blessed they were to have such a saint. The young saint replied that she was simply doing what was necessary, and after the visit, she traveled back in her carriage. Inside, she remarked that there would definitely be no problems with their periodic support for the year. Her subordinate noted that, fortunately, they had managed to increase the budget, but it would be a significant challenge to maintain it. This was due to a severe drought 2 years ago and widespread pillaging by various marauder groups. Consequently, the number of orphans had skyrocketed this year, and the Holy Kingdom also had to frequently endure raids from other intelligent species. While some races like the Nova or the Elves could be negotiated with, these lands were mostly inhabited by teeming hordes of non-sentient creatures. The saint resolved that she would have to tighten the belts of priests who cared more for their own full bellies than for the kingdom's troubles. Then, God willing, they might just survive for another couple of years, long enough to see the kingdom truly reborn. The Holy Kingdom was perpetually plagued by threats of invasion, difficult farming conditions due to its geography, and a distinct lack of mineral resources. Their faith was the last thread they clung to for survival in this unforgiving reality. At the very least, Nenia could generate income by creating holy water and performing healing, supplemented by donations from wealthy believers seeking her blessing. The kingdom had recently expanded its territory by absorbing smaller states, but Nenia didn't know how long she could maintain this delicate balance. She was painfully aware that without her, the kingdom would simply cease to exist, which is why she stressed the need for a permanent solution. If only they had the brilliant minds of Aresia, they could forge superior weapons for defense. If they had the fertile soils of Merman, their people would not starve. To covet what belongs to another was a disgusting notion, but she believed that without it, her kingdom had no future. God never seemed to help his people, she thought bitterly. Perhaps her sins would one day be exposed and she would face judgment, but she wouldn't care as long as it happened after she achieved her goals. As long as her kingdom was safe, she would accept any judgment. However, the protagonist observing her concluded that this line of thinking was utter nonsense. Nenia had other options, but she chose the easiest and most brutal one. It was as if this second chance at life, this reincarnation, had taught her nothing of morality. She claims her actions are driven by concern for her people's future, but instead of protecting her home, she has decided to prey upon her neighbors. For that transgression, our hero has resolved to wipe her out, and he possesses everything he needs to accomplish it. Meanwhile, Fina was lying in ambush, only for her target carriage to be stopped by bandits. They gloated over their find, a sizable wagon containing a wealthy-looking peddler. They mockingly asked the man if he cared to share some of his profits. The merchant shrieked in terror, begging them to take his money and spare his life. The bandit leader scoffed, saying the merchant would only turn them in later anyway, so it was nothing personal before he sent him on his way to the afterlife. The merchant pleaded desperately, crying out that he had just finally achieved success, only for this tragedy to befall him. Just then, a shout erupted from the nearby bushes as Fina burst forth, commanding them all to stop in their tracks. She halted the brigands with a powerful blast of fire magic. The stunned men looked up to see the spirit who had cast the spell present, but he failed to recognize her and questioned how to alter their approach. Fa attempted to issue a threat, but the words caught in her throat. The bandits grew slightly wary, yet the princess continued to shout, proclaiming that she was there to judge them, and that now they would be punished for their sins. The bandits scoffed, finding the situation absurd and remarking that some kid had decided to play the hero. One of them boasted that while he'd recently let his guard down, he had easily dispatched a little lizard. It was then that the princess suddenly posed a question. What if she wasn't alone? She advised him to repent for his sins while basking in the flames of her spirits. Following her declaration, she unleashed her salamanders into battle, and they immediately began spewing flames en masse. The lead brigand proclaimed he could slice through those pathetic flames with ease, but his confidence shattered when he was left utterly stunned as his blades simply melted away. The second bandit was struck with terror. If a single captive was capable of such a feat, what would happen if they didn't act decisively? And just as he feared, the spirits unleashed a torrent of fiery flames directly at the bandits' location. Naturally, the robbers were swiftly eliminated, but the coachman they had attacked was left horrified, stammering about what had just transpired. Shaking himself back to reality, he realized this was no time for contemplation. He was immensely grateful, for the girls had saved his life, and he wished to offer his heartfelt thanks, but when he turned his head to where they had been, he found they had vanished without a trace. The girls, for their part, had already fled, as Fa was exhausted from commanding her spirits. Dia checked on her, asking if she was all right. Fa clarified that her distress wasn't from the battle with the brigands, but from the terrible embarrassment she felt over those cringeworthy lines, even though they were scripted by Mr. Errol himself. A little while earlier, he had explained that they first needed to change the public's perception of spirit magic. People had grown hostile towards it due to relentless persecution by the Holy Kingdom, and there had been instances where innocent people suffered from rogue magic and spirits, or even where spirit mages themselves, in order to survive, have resorted to robbery. Incidents like these only helped the Holy Kingdom justify its actions and gain public support. At the time, Fa didn't understand what she was supposed to do. The prince reiterated that they needed to demonstrate that spirit magic isn't inherently harmful. For instance, it can be used for healing, and by taking this special approach, they could completely surprise the Holy Kingdom. Reflecting on this, the princess lamented that while actions speak louder than words, and even though they were acting covertly to spread positive rumors, she was still utterly mortified. Offering support, Dia told her she was doing a great job, explaining that these battles with bandits were an excellent way to gain combat experience. Dia mentioned that she too, before coming to Philia, had to struggle through training camps just to cover her travel expenses. Now Fa understood their purpose, but she couldn't shake the feeling of being a failure. Still, she admitted it felt good to finally help people. It was as if she'd been reborn with a new purpose, after having hidden her powers for so long. Dia, pleased with her renewed motivation, suggested they visit a few more locations. Fa could only wonder if they would get any rest that day, and was relieved to hear they would. As a result of their actions, news began to spread throughout the region about a pair of mysterious heroines who had recently become quite popular. One of the merchants recounted how they appeared out of nowhere to defeat a band of brigands, while another claimed they had single-handedly dealt with an entire horde. Reports were spreading about monsters in the village, alongside tales of certain individuals summoning strange beings to clear the collapsed bridge. No one could comprehend if it was magic, as every time the girls wielded that peculiar power, they spoke of spirits. The storyteller's companion, hearing the tale, cautiously remarked, "Isn't spirit magic supposedly the work of an evil one?" The man insisted he had only seen bizarre lizards and clay gnomes. Nothing truly out of the ordinary. Besides, they weren't Julian, so it hardly mattered. If this spirit magic was helping, why question it? And so, the protagonist of these rumors evolved from a mysterious magician into a figure known simply as the Summoner. After some time, Errol questioned Dia, asking if the Fen had executed his orders precisely. She confirmed it without hesitation, but then wondered if their actions were enough to spark a reborn faith in spirit magic. The prince admitted he wasn't certain, noting that such deep-seated beliefs don't change overnight. His companions still couldn't grasp their motives. The hero explained that just as perceptions don't shift instantly, people don't forget so easily either. Good deeds and evil ones alike remain etched in the memory of the populace, for that is simply the way of the world. With the foundation of their plan firmly laid, it was time for the next phase. The saint arrived at the Merman Imperial Palace. Inside the throne room, the emperor remarked that the young woman had traveled a great distance, to which Nanya replied she was prepared to go much farther, especially if it was for the sake of the empire. The emperor gestured toward a document, stating it would be a disgrace for the imperial family to keep a guest waiting, and proposed they conclude their business then and there. The saint presented an order to sign a slave transfer agreement with the Merman Empire. Inwardly, she considered the emperor an utter fool. It was because of him that her holy kingdom would soon be on a path to unprecedented prosperity. She just had to wait for his signature, and just as he was about to provide it, a subordinate rushed in bearing urgent news. The emperor demanded to know what had transpired. The priest explained that an urgent message had arrived from one of their spies. Nanya interjected, insisting their negotiations were important and this matter could be discussed later, but the subordinate clarified that the message was from their spy in the kingdom of Arnesia. He then revealed what had happened. Princess Fina, Amirat Janelle, who was sent to study in the kingdom of Yoria, had just publicly announced that she was capable of summoning lion spirits. Meanwhile, the princess asked her companion Aurella if he was certain about their course of action. He confirmed his conviction but told her she could still back out if she so wished. She refused, declaring they had come too far to simply retreat now. Finally, the hero encouraged her to say whatever she felt was right, promising that he would handle all the consequences. With a nod of agreement, the princess stepped out from behind the stage to face the large crowd awaiting her. Though Fina was nervous, she greeted everyone warmly and introduced herself, steeling herself for the announcement. She was ready to reveal the true reason for her presence, a truth she could only express in this place, at this very moment. The young woman was about to tell them the entire, unvarnished truth. With a steady hand, she answered the call of her power, and in an instant, several spirits materialized right before the astonished crowd. Those present immediately recognized them as the very same beings that had been summoned by the mysterious summoner during the recent epidemic. The princess had helped them all, and it was this same spirit magic that had subdued the threat. It all began on a bridge in one of the villages, where everyone witnessed the Empire's princess both summoning spirits and battling monsters. Fina then declared that she was, in fact, a spirit summoner, a gift she had possessed. She had been able to communicate with spirits since she was a young child, but her mother had taught her to conceal this ability to protect her from persecution. As the Empire and the Holy Kingdom were allies, revealing her gift could have shattered their alliance. Despite their efforts, the Emperor eventually discovered the truth, leading to the imprisonment of both Fina and her mother. While imprisoned, her mother grew gravely ill and ultimately passed away, with Fina caring for her until the very end. Following this tragedy, Fina continued to suppress her summoning abilities, fearing the Empire and viewing her own gift as a terrible curse. But everything changed when she came to study in Arnesia. It was there she met Prince Aurel, and through his guidance, she felt as if she were reborn. He showed her how to properly wield her gift and gave her a reason to be proud of bearing this mysterious power. Fina finally realized that the doctrine imposed by the Holy Kingdom, with its heavy stigma of heresy, had made her life as a princess utterly miserable. But now, she was ready for a new beginning, a kind of reincarnation of her true self for all. She declared that normal magic and spirit magic are not so different and directly addressed the Holy Kingdom, demanding they abandon their ridiculous assertions. She insisted that the claim of ordinary magic being righteous while spirit magic is evil must end, along with the senseless persecution of its users. The senseless persecution of spirit summoners must be stopped, for this cruel prejudice echoed the dark times of the past. Your entire kingdom is perpetuating this injustice, she proclaimed. You hunt them down simply because their magic is different, and it is a profound cruelty. Aurel recognized this moment as a pivotal event, one that mirrored the historic feuds that had caused great conflict in the past. Though he had previously remained detached from such matters, he understood that because of the Holy Kingdom's dogma, and the empire that followed its lead, summoners had been unjustly branded as outcasts, but public opinion was about to change. The people would clearly side with Fina. While the Holy Kingdom might threaten her based on their antiquated dogmas, this time, they would not succeed. Because now, she had him standing by her side. The hero announced his name and personally vouched for the princess's every word. The Prince of the Empire pledged to protect Princess Fina, revealing that after discovering her abilities, he had begun his own personal research. He had delved into the study of spirit magic, and he was now prepared to officially present his findings to the world. His conclusion was simple. Spirit magic is just another form of power. As both a scholar and a man of principle, he could not accept the Holy Kingdom's accusation of heresy. He then turned to the crowd asking what they truly believed. Was spirit magic evil? At that moment, someone spoke up, saying that had actually helped him immensely with her magic, even saving a person's life. The prince agreed, stating that spirit magic can be used for evil, just like any other power, but that is not a reason for it to be eradicated. He added that he didn't just sympathize with the princess's plight. He truly understood it. He acknowledged her actions would surely draw criticism from the Holy Kingdom and that she might be called to account. "Do any of you have questions regarding my statement?" he asked. "I am willing to discuss this openly, and I ask for the opinions of all those present." He then extended an offer. If there were any other summoners present besides the princess, they should seek him out for aid. He promised that they would gladly help them. Once the speeches concluded, influenced perhaps by Fina's previous good deeds, a new consensus began to form among the people. While the common folk found Princess Fina's plight worthy of sympathy, the reaction from the aristocracy and the government remained decidedly uncertain, with nobles weighing which side would be most profitable to support. Aurel, however, felt it was high time to bring this political charade to a close. Over in the Merman Imperial Palace, the throne room was seething with unrest. The butler, aghast that Princess Fa was a summoner, demanded to know if the emperor was aware of this. The emperor simply replied that it didn't matter and ordered a letter dispatched to Arnea immediately. This casual dismissal outraged the priests, who couldn't comprehend how a pact could be forged with royalty carrying the blood of vile summoners within their veins. Proclaiming that only humans were worthy of divine love, they insisted everything else must be eradicated and that the Holy Kingdom must immediately sever all contracts with them. Nenia, however, saw them as nothing but whiners and slackers, and she first demanded that a letter be sent to Arnesia, deciding that judgment could wait. But no sooner had she spoken than the emperor and the saint were informed that a message had just arrived from Arnesia. In it, Aurel indicated his desire for a serious conversation, stating his belief that there were misunderstandings between their nations and inquired if they would be willing to meet on neutral territory to discuss matters in detail. The letter was signed by the prince himself, and the reply to his summons arrived with astonishing speed. They were, in fact, willing to meet as he requested, suggesting that everyone wanted to settle the situation as swiftly as possible. To this end, our hero journeyed to the Merman Empire, where he was immediately struck by the sheer lavishness of the imperial palace. Fen, however, showed no signs of happiness about her homecoming. When Aurel asked if she was glad to be home, she only grew more sorrowful. He, on the other hand, admired the opulent interior style, even thinking he might adopt some of it for his own room. The princess remained lost in her melancholy, not understanding how her life had come to this. Aurel wondered why the guest of honor was so dejected. He told her they needed to get ready, as they still had a bit of time to discuss the most crucial points. He explained that thanks to the knowledge from his *** reincarnation ***, he would handle the arguments. Her only job was to radiate confidence. If they could present a confident front, he assured her, they would be halfway to victory. He asked if she could manage it, and the girl had little choice but to agree, offering a hesitant nod. Delighted, Aurel announced he had a gift for her that was sure to lift her spirits. When the box was opened, it revealed the very bow gifted to him by the Fire King's spirit, causing Fina to gasp in surprise. It clearly wasn't an ordinary present, it had to be something incredible. Aurel was pleased that she hadn't immediately identified it as an artifact. He explained it was a reward for her recent bravery and insisted she accept it as a gift. She asked him to wait just a moment, as there was something to be done. The princess watched in surprise, asking what he was doing. Our hero began to weave the bow's ribbon into her hair, saying it was no big deal. The girl, confused, didn't understand where he had learned such a skill. Aurel simply replied that it was a secret as he swiftly finished his work. He hoped she would now feel more confident, as if she were *** reborn ***, because the time had come for them to go. Fina agreed and took his offered hand. The emperor and the saint were already waiting for them at the meeting place. As soon as Aurel and Fina arrived, the emperor approached him directly, demanding to know why he had arranged all this and how he dared to teach Fina spirit magic. He quickly grasped their intention, to paint him as the villain in this exchange. He calmly informed the prince that while he had indeed guided Princess Fina with the spirits, his role was merely to help unlock the immense innate talent she already possessed. His Highness immediately roared that it was absolute nonsense, accusing him of not understanding the true nature of these creatures. The prince then coolly stated that this was precisely the topic he wished to discuss. He cited the ancient teachings of the Holy Realm, which decree that all spirit callers are heretics. According to scripture, they must be eradicated upon the very appearance of God's chosen. The saint confirmed this doctrine, adding that it was the very reason their order was so deeply disturbed by the princess's situation. But then, Errol interjected, pointing out that their doctrine was written over 500 years ago, a text whose understanding desperately needed to be reborn. In that era, the lands of the Holy Kingdom were home to indigenous peoples who worshipped spirits, and the heretics mentioned in their sacred covenants were, in fact, those very people, meaning it doesn't decree that all spirits should be banished. The spirits themselves are not inherently evil entities. He explained they are simply souls dwelling within the magical energy that permeates the very air. Following their logic, the Holy Kingdom would have to declare every living creature that breathes air to be evil. Nenia, becoming visibly indignant, shouted that this was nothing but absolute sophistry. Unfazed, the young man challenged them to re-examine their own dogmas and present them to the public in a clearer, more understandable form. If they did, he was confident his words would sound perfectly logical to everyone. At this, several priests joined the fray, declaring his argument absurd. They insisted Her Reverence's miraculous ability to exorcise spirits was undeniable proof of their evil nature, boasting that not even the Spirit King himself could withstand such power. Priest Kellis was sternly asked to compose himself, but our hero was secretly thrilled they had brought up the subject of the Spirit King not being able to resist. This was a detail the young man hadn't initially considered a potential problem, but at the same time, it presented a golden opportunity to verify their claims. In that case, he proposed, might I invite him to join us? Nenia looked utterly horrified at this. Someone in the crowd immediately shouted that the idea was ridiculous, as no one had successfully summoned a Spirit King for the last several hundred years. At that moment, Fina stepped forward, apologizing to everyone for the commotion she might cause over the spirit. She then began to intone a powerful chant, addressing the noble king, the greatest of the elemental lords who reigns beyond the natural world. She humbly asked him to show his flame and grace them with his presence. And then, in a blinding flash of power, the Spirit King appeared, announcing that he had arrived as summoned, per their contract. The onlookers were stunned. It was truly a king. Could the princess really command such power? The Spirit King then turned his gaze upon them and asked why he had been summoned. Did they wish for him to vaporize all their enemies? Fina hesitated for a moment before turning to face the saint. She explained that the issue was a certain human belief that spirits were inherently evil. She had called upon him to ask for his perspective on this matter. The Spirit King was visibly angered by the notion, declaring it utterly ridiculous. He stated that they are beings born of the pure magical energy of nature itself. To call them evil, he thundered, was akin to calling the very earth that sustains all life evil. Seizing the moment, Aurella added that according to the prevailing opinion in this kingdom, a belief he intended to see shattered and reborn, even a Spirit King could not resist the power of a saint who fights evil. He turned to the saint, asking for her thoughts on the matter. This is a perfect chance, he declared, to demonstrate the validity of your teaching. Nenia understood at once that she was completely cornered. And so, to the absolute astonishment of everyone, she informed them that no proof was necessary, conceding that she now understood their perspective on the misunderstanding surrounding spirits. Aurella was pleased by this concession, stating that this meant she now recognized the innocence of not only Princess Fina, but of all other summoned spirits as well, who had been so unjustly condemned. When the saintess questioned what else he possessed, the hero presented a stack of letters, declaring they belonged to the summoners. He explained that after his speech, they had finally found the courage to write and plead for his help. There were 246 letters in all. They had endured immense suffering under the Holy Kingdom's persecution, and it was time for their hope to be reborn with just compensation. This declaration sent a wave of fury across Nenia's face, while the priests murmured in disbelief, unable to understand why their saintess remained silent as her sacred teachings were so publicly defamed. Suddenly, Errol's voice cut through the tension, stating there was one final matter to address. He began to manifest an object with his power, leaving the entire assembly confused as to what they were witnessing. He clarified that it was one of his own inventions, a device called a recording sphere, capable of capturing and transmitting images. I am certain, he announced, that everyone here is all too familiar with the recent epidemic that swept through Arnesia. But I wonder, he mused, how would you all feel if you learned this plague was deliberately unleashed? The representatives of the Merman Empire stirred uneasily. They were baffled by his implication, though they agreed that if it were not accidental, such an act was utterly unforgivable. The prince then proclaimed he would reveal the one responsible, a person who could infiltrate any place and commit any atrocity. He was, of course, referring to Saintess Nenia. The sphere's projection showed the mysterious silhouette of a woman as she shattered a vial containing an obscure, dark liquid. That vial, he explained, held the very disease that triggered the epidemic, and in the next moment, the figure simply vanished into the shadows. Errol narrated over the footage, explaining that these devices were originally installed to track the activity of bandits. However, 1 week before the outbreak, they began capturing these strange events, and it was happening all across the Eresia Empire. Furthermore, the prince declared, I have secured samples from these very vessels, so do not even attempt to justify this. It dawned on the observers that he had deliberately withheld his claim against Nenia, waiting for this exact moment to expose and obliterate her reputation as a saint in front of so many powerful figures. He offered a slight apology, noting that a thorough investigation was still required, but he had heard the Merman Empire and the Holy Kingdom were about to forge a pact. Therefore, he had decided to act swiftly. The audience was horrified, unsure if any of this could be true, but the saintess insisted they were merely ludicrous accusations. Turning to His Majesty, she found only hesitation in the emperor's eyes, yet the woman continued to remind him that the alliance between the empire and the Holy Kingdom had stood for hundreds of years, asking if they were truly willing to destroy it all based on what she called falsified evidence. Is there truly a need to annul our treaty, especially considering your current financial difficulties? At that moment, Fina's voice cut through the tense debate. Your Majesty, she called out, I have a proposal. Her older brother warned that it was not the right time, but the princess was persistent, shouting that she only asked to be heard this one time, for she could solve the financial problems of the empire without any aid from the Holy Kingdom. She then requested a specific scroll from her maid, which was brought to her at once. In it, she revealed, was a detailed plan to establish full-scale trade with the Eresia Empire. If this project succeeded, their economy could be reborn. The empire's problems, she claimed, would finally be solved. The emperor hesitated yet again, and Errol figured he knew exactly what the man was thinking. He just wanted to sell out his people for a quick profit. The emperor had absolutely no thought for the long-term future, but continued to assert that if they surrendered the slaves to the Holy Kingdom now, the empire would ultimately lose far more. He argued that even if it took time, they could cultivate new crops, and with that foundation, they could restore their trade networks. Only then could the empire truly prosper. This impassioned speech even took the Spirit King by surprise, as Errol clearly understood the empire's genuinely vast farmland. With such incredible resources, generating wealth was entirely possible. He only needed to suggest a few modifications to the land. Ownership methods. Fina agreed, reiterating that with this plan, the empire could be completely reborn without selling its people to the Holy Kingdom. Nenia interrupted, claiming to understand her feelings but reminding everyone that the emperor had already agreed to a treaty with them. She then demanded confirmation from His Majesty. The emperor hesitated again, at a loss for words. Seeing this, the hero, it had to be hypnosis. That was the only explanation for the emperor's submissive behavior all this time. He knew he couldn't let it stand. He couldn't just leave things as they were. In that instant, he applied a jolt of force to the emperor, and the saint realized with horror that something had fundamentally shifted. The emperor then announced that he needed to discuss the matter with his advisors. He cited the solid accusations Prince Errol had voiced against Lady Nenia. The saint shrieked, calling the entire notion absurd. She declared she wouldn't even dignify it with an excuse. Errol pressed his advantage, pointing out that from the very beginning, he had started to. If she was truly a saint, he now openly questioned her so-called miracles, asking if they were all just a grand deception. After all, she wasn't providing any proof, so perhaps she was fooling them all. Those in attendance began to whisper, wondering if she was a witch instead of a saint. They even began to recall that many priests had mysteriously disappeared. Hearing this, Nenia realized she was surrounded by useless idiots. She decided a quick hypnosis refresh was necessary, but just as she tried to use her power on the emperor, she was intercepted by a fiery blast from the Spirit King, who declared he would no longer tolerate her twisted games. The saint was furious, her power surging violently before she unleashed it in a massive wave. The priest rejoiced, proclaiming it a miracle from the Holy Realm. However, Errol knew this was the beginning of her end. He signaled Fina to act. The girl nodded, asking him to rely on her, for she would not allow anyone to steal the Empire's chance at reincarnation. The priest began to pray loudly, urging everyone to witness the blinding light. In their eyes, this was a true miracle. They were blinded and utterly confused. This was supposed to be the ultimate proof of their teachings, but then, suddenly, everyone present began to gasp and collapse. Representatives of the Merman Empire tried to sound the alarm, but they too were quickly overcome by the same force as the doors to the room slammed shut. Watching the chaos unfold, Errol understood that the people were not dead, but had merely been knocked unconscious. So that was her power. He finally grasped how the saint, Nenia, operated. It turned out she was capable of devastating mental attacks. At that moment, Fina turned to the King of Spirits for help. He was more than happy to assist, rushing toward Nenia to strike, but she managed to block the blow, though the effort clearly took a toll. On top of that, the spirit's fiery attack pierced straight through her defenses. Fina shouted that the attack had worked. She commanded her companions to aid the Spirit King, and they all attacked at once with a coordinated barrage of flames. At that moment, the salamander and its fire control were completely focused on the battle. However, despite the immense power of these combined attacks, Nenia was unharmed. She simply laughed. He once said that when striking the symbol of an enemy army, you must always aim for the head. And with those words, she unleashed her dark power directly upon Fina. The girl was stunned as it happened, for she realized something had pierced her body, yet she felt no pain. Even as her consciousness began to blur, she saw the figure of a woman standing before her. To her horror, the princess recognized her own mother, who admonished her, saying she had been warned, after all, to stay away from magic and spirits. Even after death, she still refused to obey. Then, her mother's voice rose to a shout, asking if the girl had forgotten the very reason they were imprisoned. It was because of her cursed powers that His Majesty had discovered everything. The woman continued her tirade against her daughter, but Fina, even with her mind clouded, knew that this wasn't truly her mother. With tears in her eyes, she recalled how His Majesty had nearly ended her life, and how her mother had desperately pleaded with him to let her live. It was clear the princess was in a perilous state. The Spirit King urged her to regain her senses, warning that if she continued down this path, their connection would be severed. Abruptly, Nenia smiled and declared that it was getting late. After uttering these words, she instantly redirected her dark energy at the spirit, who then began to gradually fade from existence. Once the dust settled, the woman was seized by a violent coughing fit. She wondered just how much time she had left. The Holy Kingdom definitely needed her, for now. This power, so destructive to her own body, was something she despised using, but this time there was simply no other choice. The people she had previously attacked were already recovering. The woman thought to herself that even if she were to die, she needed to set things right. She cast her hypnosis once more, commanding everyone to forget the truth they had learned today about her spreading the plague and every point of contention that arose here. Furthermore, Princess Fina and Prince Errol had suffered an attack by evil spirits on their way here. The treaty between the Merman Empire and the Holy Kingdom of Jilin was also successfully concluded. With those final words, she ended the hypnosis, her gaze falling upon Errol's unconscious body lying beside her. She decided it was time to end this, but first, she would take all of his knowledge and use it for the good of her kingdom. She would gratefully accept it all, but what happened next left her completely stunned, for the sheer volume of information this man possessed was simply overwhelming. Then, he suddenly stood up and began to yawn, casually asking if this was really all her grand show amounted to. He called it boring and utterly predictable, though perhaps that was something to be thankful for, as she had conveniently created a space where no one could get in their way. Nenia demanded in horror how he had managed to do that. Errol leaned in close and asked, how could she possibly defeat him when he was already living his 101st life? There was no way he could lose to someone who had only experienced a single reincarnation. He then posed the shocking question, wasn't she the one who was reborn as Nenia Whale? For daring to enter his memories, oh, she would have to pay the price. Now, it was her turn to reveal all of her secrets to him. It all began several hundred years ago. It started in a remote village within the Holy Kingdom of Jelian, where a baby girl named Romelophilia was born. As she grew older, she would pray to God asking why the people of the Holy Kingdom had to live in such poverty. She couldn't understand why they remained so dedicated to their faith while they were starving. The answer she received, unfortunately, was once again silence. And 2 years later, when the priest presented a new girl as their next saint, a horrifying realization dawned on Rilla. She saw the Holy Kingdom for what it truly was, a den of vipers where high-ranking priests dangled faith like a carrot, only to fleece the devout and gorge on their own decadent desires, all while their fanatical king remained blissfully blind to the truth. Rilla understood then that prayers alone wouldn't fill the bellies of a starving nation. She would have to forge a different path. She refused to become another one of their vile puppets. To become a sacred symbol, a person must undergo a special rite. This ritual bestows a unique and powerful gift upon them, different for every individual who receives it. While all previous saints had wielded their power solely for the church's benefit, Rilla was a different breed entirely. She began by returning the unjustly hoarded wealth to the people and used her newfound power to sideline the king, who was merely a pawn to the priests. Many were saved by her actions, but in Rilla's eyes, it was a mere drop in the ocean. Even though people's lives had improved, the improvement felt temporary, as so many deep-rooted problems remained unresolved. War was still inevitable, and the refugee crisis worsened. The girl knew that relying on divine grace was a fool's errand and decided that a more pragmatic approach was necessary. A rational assessment of her capabilities against reality led to one conclusion. She could only save her holy realm, and in that fight, mercy would have to be cast aside. And so, Rilla, under the guise of selling holy water, began brokering deals that heavily favored the Holy Kingdom. Any nation that dared to resist her was swiftly branded heretical and then mercilessly crushed in the ensuing holy war. Rilla knew that if the truth ever came out, they would call her a devil in a saint's skin, but she pressed on relentlessly, doing whatever it took for the sake of her own kingdom. But time is a cruel master. Her body and mind grew frail with age. As her vigilance waned, the priest's insatiable greed began to fester once more, and tragically, she had failed to find a worthy successor. Rilla lamented that with just a little more time, she could have fortified the Holy Kingdom to a point where it was unshakable. She could have created a strength that no country could ever threaten, but her time had simply run out. Her final, desperate wish was for another chance, a reincarnation to be reborn and finish what she started, a wish that was surprisingly granted. Soon, a new saint was born in the heart of the kingdom, a beautiful baby girl they named Nenia Whale. Now, Nenia explained that after Rilla's death, the next chosen saint was utterly useless, a complete good-for-nothing, leaving the Holy Kingdom on the brink once more. So, in this new life, she eliminated their king under the pretext of a sudden illness and immediately began to prepare for war. She purged the rot from within and expanded the territories of the Holy Kingdom. Having been through it all before, this reborn life presented few challenges. There were no real difficulties this time around, at least not until the appearance of the hero Aurella Eresia. He informed her that all he did was make a little money from his wares, and now every nation was after his head. Nenia shrieked, "A little? That enormous fortune is not a little. With that wealth, children wouldn't starve, and so many orphans could have grown up in safety. You are no better than anyone else. I am simply protecting my people." The hero retorted that he didn't deny his greed, but at least the absurd thought had never occurred to him that it was necessary to wipe an entire nation from existence for the good of those close to him. A saint who refuses mercy is no different than a demon. Her companion, the devil himself, rose to his feet, warning her that even if she tried to attack, she'd be dead before a single finger could touch him. Errol saw the dawning realization in her eyes. Nenia declared she wouldn't make excuses for anyone, including him. As their ruler, she would accept full responsibility for her actions, but she pleaded for the children of the Holy Kingdom to be spared. The hero scoffed at her audacity, retorting that she mistakenly believes her reincarnation, having lived 2 lives, has made her wiser than anyone else, or that her life holds more value. He declared that was completely wrong. She and he were just as human as everyone else. They had simply been granted more time. For him, listening to her felt like rereading a childish diary. The saint insisted that she simply had no other choice and begged him to make a promise. Errol was astounded. She was brazenly making demands right up to the very end. He agreed to provide minimal care for them, stating the rest would be her karmic debt. With that settled, Nenia turned her attention to the useless parasites, her priests, proclaiming that if they remained, they would only bring harm to Errol and the Holy Kingdom. Without a moment's hesitation, she unleashed her power upon them. This was no mere hypnosis. It was a force designed to kill, and it did just that, as they collapsed lifelessly to the ground. Having dealt with them, the girl fixed her gaze on Errol, who simply raised his hand towards her, channeling his own power as he uttered, "Goodbye." In that final moment, she knew her end had come. A short while later, Fina slowly began to regain her senses. As she opened her eyes, she couldn't recall when she had lost consciousness, but there was no time for reflection. The matter of the sainthood had to be settled. Suddenly, she became aware of people standing over her. They erupted in joy as the princess came to, shouting that Princess Fina herself had vanquished the witch who had threatened the entire empire. The princess herself was completely bewildered by what they were saying. Errol, was marveling at how the Spirit King had incredibly formed a contract after 100 years to save the Merman Empire from peril. Playing along, the princess claimed she must have landed an attack just before losing consciousness. And just like that, the tense conflict between the Holy Kingdom, the Merman Empire, and the Eresia Empire was concluded. Those present simply accepted this version of events, as their memories only went up to the point they fainted. Since Fina was the last one seen opposing this, it was the only logical conclusion for them. The Emperor, now free from the magical influence, finally realized the depth of his error and immediately apologized to his sister. His apology brought the princess immense joy. From that day, the prejudice against conscripts in the empire vanished, leading to a truly positive outcome. Subsequently, with the Holy Kingdom left leaderless, negotiations with them became significantly easier. They even issued an official apology to Fina. The truth of all the events, the orchestrated, the persecution of spirit summoners, and the saint's ambition to conquer other nations was made public, leaving most people in a state of shock. The citizens of the Holy Kingdom renounced their saint, branding her a witch, and even the neutral nations began to change their stance. Sometime later, Errol and Fina found a moment to talk. The princess informed him that to fulfill her duty to the kingdom of Aurella, she would have to remain, and so she bid him farewell. The hero quipped, "It sounds like you enjoyed your time as a hostage." He teased that he never knew she had such a peculiar hobby. Fina was indignant at his remark, but she was grateful that he had honored his promise. He had revealed the truth about the holy monastic water and cleared the name of the part. To the invocator, the prince dismissed it as a trivial matter, assuring her that he always honors his promises. As a final farewell to Fa, he simply wished her the best of luck. With that, their goodbyes were exchanged. The princess, however, couldn't quite comprehend the strange feeling welling up inside her. A peculiar sensation. In the time that followed, trade between Eresia and Merman flourished, and their diplomatic ties strengthened immensely. New crops began to sprout across the vast lands of Momia, which Arnesia eagerly imported. Fina soon reported a new request. They had been asked to sell cocoa beans. Considering their current prosperity, this wasn't an issue. Chocolate, after all, is a prized luxury among the nobility and indeed, it was the very same bean that had once sparked the bitter conflict between Errol and Gothel. Errol confirmed that supplying the beans was a delicate matter, as they could only be cultivated in limited quantities. He explained that he never intended to monopolize them from the beginning. The princess pointed out that he had gone as far as refitting a ship, but Errol brushed it off as a last resort. In truth, she knew he did it all. A Coke. She then mused, "Yes, this situation only benefits them. Since this is our reality now, we must continue to move forward." Furthermore, the very heroes who had defended their kingdom now wished to follow her, proclaiming that the princess was, without a doubt, the most powerful spirit caster of their era. The girl realized with dawning horror that this belief stemmed from the incident involving the Spirit King's summoning and the saint's downfall, but it had all been a carefully orchestrated performance, a grand deception. The prince, however, pointed out that despite it being a hoax, she was the perfect idol for the summoners, possessing both the stature and the perceived ability, so she should simply accept her newfound role. Ultimately, the princess had no choice but to relent, telling him to send her followers to her. Errol was delighted to hear this. The princess then turned to him, a slight blush on her cheeks, and declared that for everything he had given her, she would certainly repay him someday. He expressed his gratitude but cautioned her not to push herself too hard, admitting he couldn't imagine how she planned to do so. Meanwhile, the Jellian Holy Kingdom, following the demise of its final saint, entered a period of steady decline. On the condition that they completely renounced their faith, they were spared retaliation from the other nations and thus managed to survive, essentially reborn as the secular kingdom of Jellian. An expert noted that any nation opposing Aurella Eresia would sooner or later face collapse, while those who forged alliances with them continued to prosper. This observation quickly became accepted as an immutable truth. Our hero, however, couldn't comprehend what he had supposedly done to earn such a fearsome reputation. He wasn't that kind of person. And just like that, 2 years passed since the dramatic events in the Holy Kingdom. Errol, now his usual charming and laid-back self, was casually sipping on a chilled Coke while munching on chocolate bars. At 20 years old, he had finally found a moment to simply enjoy life, a peace he had longed for since his reincarnation. For the past 2 years, their ship had safely returned with a bountiful crop of cola fruit, all thanks to his painstaking experiments with breeding. By creating the precise conditions required, the cola nut finally took root in Philia. He had made every effort, undertaking a meticulous process, right down to selecting components with a precision of 0.1 grams. At long last, our hero had the Coke he had missed so dearly. A wind of unimaginable prosperity blew through the kingdom of Arnesia, prompting the hero to think that perhaps he should also order a supply of cola fruit from Merman. In his personal paradise, there were no longer any enemies to speak of, only the occasional annoying disturbance. His people dealt with those. It was, for all intents and purposes, a time of peace and tranquility. He hoped he would have no further cause for concern, but the reality was that new reasons for worry would soon arise, and the source, just as it had been a few years prior, was none other than his mother. While the saint's schemes were merely irritating, he had never experienced a sense of peril this profound. He was genuinely terrified. The young man pleaded for a chance to explain, claiming he had been completely swamped with promoting a new cola product. Leanna cut him off, declaring she was weary of such flimsy excuses, especially since he was now a man of 20 years. It was high time, she insisted, for him to seriously consider marriage, though Errol privately grumbled that for someone only in his 20s, the expectations of this era were far too demanding. Unbelievably harsh. Just then, a child's cry pierced the air, and our hero scooped up the toddler, remarking that even little Leah would agree her brother had his reasons. He has his reasons, he cooed, so you shouldn't scold him too much. This tiny diplomat was none other than the fourth Princess Eresia. Eresia was an utterly adorable baby girl, Errol's little sister born just last year, and the youngest princess of this powerful nation. A late-in-life baby, in fact. When Errol first heard the news of the pregnancy, he felt a sincere respect for his parents' impressive vitality. He even checked on young Leah, just in case. But she was a perfectly normal child, though her older brother happened to be the wealthiest man on the continent. With the continent's richest man for a brother, it seemed her future was destined to be far sweeter than his own. Just then, the baby was whisked away by a maid. The maid explained that the young princess was hungry. Now then, enough of your excuses, his mother resumed, her tone leaving no room. She acknowledged that he was busier than anyone else, but insisted that was no reason whatsoever to forsake the matter of marriage. The prince countered, but can I really marry before Cain? I mean, she's still single, after all. Liana swiftly parried, stating that Philia had recently informed her of Cain's participation in a very large-scale operation. The operation was set to begin very soon. Errol sarcastically wondered if large-scale operation was the new code word for marriage. In the end, he knew he was cornered. There was nothing left to do but feign consideration. He decided to just pretend he was willing to cooperate and then make his escape at the first opportunity. Claiming his schedule was about to become incredibly packed starting this year, he bid his mother a hasty farewell and teleported away. As soon as he vanished, the maid noted that Prince Errol was trying to wriggle out of his responsibilities again. Liana admitted she used to worry that no one would want to marry a prince with no real power. But things are different now, she declared. This time, I refuse to simply sit back and watch. The maid, Chaina, realized that Madame Liana was plotting something formidable. Something wonderfully terrible, perhaps. After all, Liana herself had a history of being just as eccentric as Errol, if not more so. It was that very nature which, as a mere maid, had once captured the attention of the former king. While she had become more reserved after the prince's birth, it seemed her maternal anxiety was reawakening her old, formidable nature. The maid cautiously asked her mistress if she had some kind of plan in mind. The woman revealed that, as a matter of fact, she had recently received a most curious letter. Her attendant naturally inquired about the sender. Liana simply smiled, assuring her that everything would work out perfectly. My intuition tells me so, she said with a twinkle in her eye. Meanwhile, Errol, having made his escape, was reflecting on the fact that he'd managed to hold out for this long, which was an accomplishment in itself. After all, his marital status was a matter of great interest not only to the local aristocracy but to foreign nations as well. The person he chose to marry could dramatically impact not just their own empire, but the entire world's balance of power. For this reason, Errol had always deliberately pretended to be carefully weighing his options. But now, he was being bombarded with questions not just from his mother, but from practically everyone he met. He couldn't go anywhere without hearing, "So, when are you getting married?" It felt like a constant, public interrogation. Truly, no matter how many times one is reborn into a new life, the subject of marriage remains an absolute headache. He couldn't fathom who invented the wretched institution. As if on cue, a young woman nearby cheerfully informed her companion that she herself had just gotten married last month. Most people worry because they have no prospects. He was the one everyone wanted to marry, and he was tormented by an absolute flood of proposals. The hero insisted he needed more time, wishing he could be reborn without these overwhelming obligations. He was just contemplating where to hide out for the day when, at that exact moment, Asha found him. And she wasn't alone, Sina was with her. They cornered him, announcing that it was finally time for him to make a decision. The hero was completely resentful, and to his utter shock, even Dia added that, this time, they had all come prepared to personally escort him. Aurel wondered in sheer horror what had gotten into them and why they possessed such a reborn sense of determination. He couldn't figure out how they had even managed to find him. Then the truth came out, as the girls admitted that a certain Miss Liana had informed them of his location to ensure he would take this matter seriously. The woman he'd just been speaking with wished the young master good luck, adding that she hoped to hear some good news soon. Aurel erupted, yelling that they were supposed to be serving him and he couldn't understand why they were following his mother's orders. This was all the more reason to remain a bachelor for life, and just like that, Liana's grand operation to get Aurel married was officially underway. He found himself bound and utterly outraged by the turn of events, as the girls in the carriage simply told him to get over it. The young man was in disbelief that he had actually been tied up just for a marriage meeting. This entire plot had been set in motion the previous day. Liana had contacted the girls and apologized for summoning them at such a late hour. She was addressing Asha, Senna, and Dia. Asha assured her mistress it was no problem at all, but admitted she was curious why they had been called, in secret, without their master knowing. The woman explained that, as they had probably already guessed, it was regarding his matchmaking. As his mother, she began, I know him very well, and he will undoubtedly try to sneak away again. The girls knew this was completely true. Liana wasn't asking for the impossible, she just needed them to prevent the boy from escaping. She warned them, it's clear that if he decides to hide, he won't be easy to find. Even though he's physically quite ordinary and wouldn't use magic against them, the girls stated that they would do their absolute best but raise an important concern. Even if they managed to bring him there by force, it would be pointless if he adamantly refused the engagement himself. Mrs. Liana told them not to worry about that, assuring them that this particular candidate would definitely not leave Aurel feeling indifferent. After all, she added with a smile, she is a very determined young woman. It turned out to be none other than Princess Fina who greeted them all. Asha was the first to ask when she had arrived in Philia, since they hadn't received any news of her visit. The princess pointed out that if they had heard about it, the news would have surely reached Aurel, so she had specifically requested her arrival be kept secret. Sina then observed that according to the schedule, the original candidate was supposed to be a lady from a different noble house. Fena explained that Mrs. Liana had helped her make arrangements so they could make it a surprise. The lady herself added that, even in a foreign country, marriages between members of royal families with a low chance of inheriting the throne are quite common. The princess then asked if they felt that she wasn't a suitable match for Aurel. The girls immediately exclaimed that, on the contrary, their hope for this pairing had just been reborn, in fact, just 2 years ago when they had all spent time together, they had been secretly cheering for her. Sina even added that they had made a bet on it. Fena was genuinely surprised to hear this and said that, in any case, for Aurel's sake, this engagement must succeed, so she was counting on their help. The girls eagerly agreed, promising their full support, and that was precisely how the current situation came to be, with Aurel now arriving at the engagement meeting. He was clearly displeased, and there, a young woman was waiting for him. The hero was completely stunned to see her, as Fena casually remarked on the beautiful weather. She shyly hid her face slightly and invited him to take a seat, because her formal posture was so unusual. Aurel noticed the elegant dress and the subtle perfume. She was clearly putting on a grand display, and she even used a formal title, which was completely out of character for her. He took a seat, admitting that he simply couldn't fathom that she had orchestrated this entire event. Is this the gratitude you mentioned? He prompted, asking her to be straightforward, but she simply deflected, repeating that the weather was lovely. Our hero quickly realized she was definitely laying the act on a bit thick, and he was growing tired of the charade. He figured it was likely because the servants and their entourage were watching them. Ever since the incident 2 years ago, all sorts of rumors had been flying around. Abruptly, the chosen one stood and faced the gentleman. She proposed that, since the opportunity was perfect, perhaps they could take a boat ride on the beautiful lake. Aurel was slightly taken aback, realizing she was determined to see this matter through today. And so, after a short while, they found themselves on the boat. Fina mentioned that she heard from the maids that the local nobility frequently arranged romantic rendezvous on these very boats. The prince confirmed it, adding that some people used to row so vigorously that the boat would capsize, turning a lakeside date into an impromptu swimming lesson. Fortunately, the boats had since been enchanted with magic, so now they glided along without any effort, which was rather amusing. An awkward silence fell between them after his words. Fina observed that no matter how many years went by, Aurel never changed. I suppose he doesn't understand a woman's heart in the slightest. Meanwhile, the young man was just relieved she was finally acting like herself again. I'll admit, I don't know the first thing about a woman. We're adults, the princess exclaimed, frustrated that he was being so dense. After all, she had gone to such great lengths to look beautiful for him, hoping he would at least have some kind of reaction, putting in so much effort and even threatening or rather persuading the nobles of the empire. His lessons, by the way, had proven to be incredibly useful. Aurel found himself wondering if that was truly what he had taught her. If you considered it from that perspective, far too many questionable memories surfaced, making him feel like a sinner. Suddenly, Fina told him not to worry. She declared that right now, not even her own brother would dare to oppose her. The hero stared, wondering if this was the same timid Fina he once knew standing before him. It was like she had been completely reborn. He also couldn't fathom how she had secured his mother's consent. Didn't she object? The princess reported that his mother was so delighted that she had even expressed her gratitude. It made Errol question what on earth he had been doing on all his previous dates. It was in that moment that Errol realized that karma had finally come to collect its due. Fina continued, saying she could understand why he was so insistent on avoiding these arranged meetings. After all, the other young ladies had no idea about his true personality. He had to admit that he couldn't deny that. But Fina insisted that she was different. She claimed to know him inside and out, like the back of her hand. With her, he could be his true self, and she would accept it all without judgment. Errol grew a bit cautious, warning her that she might come to regret those words. Fina observed that he was avoiding marriage, likely because he thought it would be a hindrance to him. In that case, she pressed, "Wouldn't I be the most suitable partner for you?" Our hero was stunned by the fact that he had just received a marriage proposal. The chosen one continued her pitch, promising she wouldn't meddle in his affairs and wouldn't let him be dragged into political schemes. On the contrary, she would act as a shield, preventing many such inconveniences while the young man processed her words. She added that, given their age, it was high time they chose their partners. He had already delayed marriage for a long time, and she couldn't enter one herself, forgetting the bond between them. That, she explained, is precisely why she was telling Errol this now. In her mind, he was the most suitable candidate for a husband. Naturally, this was a calculated move. If he were her partner, even the most troublesome aristocrats, including her own brother, wouldn't dare to bother her. As she boldly placed her hand on his arm. With a hint of embarrassment, she admitted she wasn't sure if he'd understand her motives, but she was certain that she could understand him, regardless of his actions. Errol questioned whether she truly grasped the full weight of her words. Fina confirmed that she understood perfectly. It was strange, she mused. He had a terrible temper and teased her relentlessly, yet she couldn't get him out of her mind. Our hero remarked to himself, "Just listen to that description." By her own words, he sounded like the worst possible candidate for an engagement. The princess hesitated for a moment before adding that she cared for him deeply. He was the only person who had ever helped her without any ulterior motives and never judged her for her abilities, and so, she leaned in closer, asking what Errol's answer would be. Wasn't she the perfect person for the role? She added that, in principle, he didn't have to give her an answer immediately. Fina knew that, given Errol's personality, he would most likely deliberate on the matter carefully before providing his response. She had laid all her cards on the table. All that was left was to wait. But then, unexpectedly, our hero leaned in towards her. Noticing her flustered expression, he teasingly asked what was wrong. After all, she was the one who wanted to hear an answer from him. Wasn't she? As she had pointed out, it was time to make a final decision. Indeed, now seemed like the perfect moment to make things official. He then called her by her full name, which only served to confuse the princess even more. Errol declared that he had heard her sincere feelings, and so he would give his answer in kind. He agreed to the marriage, declaring that now she had no way of backing out. He then slyly asked if perhaps they should continue where they had previously left off, but the flustered princess pleaded with him to wait. The prince simply stated that she was the one who initiated this, so she shouldn't try to shy away from it later. Following this momentous event, she spent the next while walking around in a complete daze, feeling as though her life had been utterly reborn, but the date was an undeniable success. Meanwhile, Lana was overjoyed. She had heard that her son's meeting with the princess went splendidly. It made her realize how unfair she had been to him all this time, constantly pushing him to go on dates with other ladies when he already had someone he cared for. Now it all made sense why he had been so resistant. Addressing her, she acknowledged that their relationship had been rather vague in the past. She now saw it wasn't simply because he was shy. As her son tried to explain himself, his mother assured him not to worry, because she didn't mind at all. She thought the princess was a truly honest and wonderful young woman. Errol couldn't help but wonder what Fina had said to charm his mother so completely. Regardless, they would be seeing each other more often now, and the princess was entirely forgiven. Several months flew by after that pivotal day. The cola enterprise had achieved a state of stability, and now even the local populace was free to enjoy the beverage. But that wasn't the end of his ambitions. To create his ideal paradise, cola alone was not enough. That's why the construction of the city's grand resort area had finally been completed. Errol saw that his town now offered not only fun and flavor, but also its own luxurious resort, making it the perfect vacation destination. His ultimate goal since his reincarnation was to build this perfect life, and it was finally becoming a reality. Out of the blue, Dia asked if he planned to host an opening banquet like he did last time. The hero replied that he would like to, but it didn't seem entirely necessary this time around. The purpose of the last banquet was to announce the existence of Philia, but rumors had already spread like wildfire among the nobility on their own. Besides, there was another, far more important event that required his serious preparation. The enchantress correctly guessed he must be referring to the wedding. Our protagonist confirmed her suspicion, stating that it certainly seemed. It seems Mom and Fina are genuinely looking forward to this. If he keeps hosting banquets like this, the impressiveness will never fade. Dia then inquired about the invitations, to which Errol explained it wasn't for a special occasion, but rather a small gathering of friends and family. He felt they had all worked so incredibly hard for so long that it was finally time to relax together at this informal reception. A short while later, Fina received a letter from her lover, which surprised her since he could have simply approached her in person. She couldn't fathom why he would choose to write, and her first thought was that he had finally decided to announce their wedding. He had been procrastinating for ages, and dodging questions was becoming a real challenge, so the princess opened the letter with a surge of joy. However, it contained an invitation to a new hot springs resort area, and her parents had been invited as well. The current emperor was also on the guest list, as was Sister Kana, who was absolutely ecstatic about the event. When the day of the banquet finally arrived, Errol delivered a speech, thanking everyone for attending the grand opening of their resort. He explained that he organized this event so that everyone could get some well-deserved rest and relieve their accumulated fatigue. He urged them to enjoy themselves, feel completely reborn, and perhaps tell others about this wonderful place, wishing them a pleasant stay. After a little while, the emperor remarked that this was the first time in his life he had ever experienced a vacation like this. He found it truly pleasant as he and his son soaked in Philia's special bath, with the hero savoring the long overdue relaxation. The water was perfect for relieving the deep tension in his back, and he was glad he'd prepared not just the sauna, but other amenities too. Suddenly, his father commented that he had passed the throne to his son at just the right time, otherwise he'd never have dreamed of such places. Errol noted that his older brother couldn't make it due to work and joked that he would have cried if he had heard their father's remark. The man declared that he must visit this place more often and was eager to try the other wellness treatments available. Soon, Kana found Aurella and marveled that she'd only been away from Philly for a short time, yet he had already built so much. The hero greeted her warmly, and his sister immediately asked him how he had been doing. The prince assured her he was fine, then pointed out how her knights seemed completely captivated by the massage chairs. He explained it was his latest product, chairs he designed himself that not only massage the body but also stimulate blood circulation to promote rehabilitation. Kana confessed she didn't quite understand the mechanics but admitted that her grueling training methods were probably wearing them out. Her brother noted that few could keep up with her pace and that after a session in those chairs, her knights would feel completely reborn. Delighted by the thought, his sister rushed over to check them out, and Errol wondered when she would finally grow up, glad she was having fun. He then headed towards the hot spring, hoping for a moment of peace, but was suddenly met by Fina, who had finally found him. Errol told her he was just about to look for her, and casually asked what she had been up to. The girl begged him not to ask, explaining that everyone was pestering her about them, and she was growing tired of deflecting their questions. She then looked around and asked if these were the hot springs, admitting she didn't understand their appeal at first, but now it was crystal clear. The prince explained he'd always wanted to create a sanctuary where he could relax with friends, a dream that felt like a reborn purpose for him. His beloved teased that he was talking like a retiree, before Fina shyly insisted that there was something far more important to discuss them. When she asked about their wedding date, the hero simply told her not to worry, assuring her that he had everything perfectly under control. He urged her to rely on him, insisting he could help her relax after all the recent stress, which made the girl wonder if he was trying to be slick again. Her suspicions, however, quickly melted away as he treated her to a special massage using his own unique and effective method. And while the couple was enjoying their peaceful moment, a few of the girls were shamelessly eavesdropping nearby. They began whispering about how good the two looked together, and then Asia suggested they could get a closer look, but SAA immediately shut that down as going way too far. Unbeknownst to them, the hero himself could hear their entire conversation with perfect clarity, wondering what these curious onlookers were hoping to achieve. After emerging from the hot spring, she remarked on how smooth her skin felt, a sentiment echoed by Terrell and the others who were also enjoying the pleasant effects. Suddenly, Errol captured the attention of everyone present, announcing that as their reception was drawing to a close, he had something important to say. He pulled his sweetheart into an embrace and declared his intention to marry his fiancée, Fina, very soon, inviting everyone to congratulate. Of course, he clarified that the official announcement would be made a little later. Still, he wanted to inform those present first, and everyone responded with genuine joy, heartily congratulating the loving couple. Soon, the aristocrats were buzzing with the news that Mr. Errol had chosen a princess as his bride. Considering the lord's own royal descent, they mused that his choice of a foreign princess was a perfectly natural one, and in any case, objections would be useless. Meanwhile, Errol had found a secluded spot, far from any prying eyes, which was exactly what he needed to begin his intricate work. At that moment, his mind flashed back to his infancy in this world, when he had first attempted to create jewelry. Those primitive forgeries were a world away from the skills he possessed after his reincarnation. This time, he vowed, it was going to be completely different, and with that thought, he manifested an exquisitely beautiful stone from thin air. After admiring his creation, the young man made the decision to name it the Eternal Gem. A short while later, a maid arrived for the gentleman, reporting that it was time to get ready, only to stop in awe at what she saw, asking what the magnificent gem was. The prince explained that it was a wedding present for Fina. He felt that only a one-of-a-kind necklace would be suitable for her and asked the maid to have it sent to his chosen lady. Next, he began preparing for the ceremony, dressing in his formal attire for the occasion. The maid mentioned she was worried when she heard the hero used to run away from such events, but was relieved he was so calm now, a testament to how much he'd changed since being reborn. Errol guessed she was referring to stories from his childhood, before turning his thoughts to the present and asking where Fina was. He was informed that she had arrived before him and was getting ready, but that they were not permitted to see each other until the ceremony. The hero understood completely, knowing that the process of getting into a wedding dress can take a very long time, and to intrude on such a moment would be in terribly poor taste. The maid then observed that even the bravest men are usually nervous at their weddings, yet the gentleman seemed remarkably calm. While he didn't feel quite so composed on the inside, he simply stated that his courage and calmness were like a second nature to him. And yet, for some reason, her compliment left him with a strange pang of conscience. After a little more time passed, everything was finally ready for the grand ceremony to begin. The gathered aristocrats commented that a wedding of this magnitude was indeed fitting for Mr. Errol, whispering that a foreign princess is far better than a local aristocrat, before deciding not to broach such sensitive topics. The master of ceremonies announced that the bride and groom were preparing to make their grand entrance, inviting everyone to bless their future and enjoy the celebration. Errol and Fina finally emerged, exquisitely dressed for the occasion, and naturally, the first thing the ladies in attendance noticed was the breathtaking necklace. Rumor had it that Mr. Errol went to great lengths to acquire it, and it appeared to have been crafted specifically for the princess. The master of ceremonies then addressed the couple, asking if they vowed to cherish one another through all trials and tribulations, to love each other as they love themselves, and to remain together until death itself parted them. Fina joyfully affirmed her vow, and as the groom prepared to respond, his mind drifted to an old, familiar story. Once, there lived a fool who experienced an unnaturally long existence, for he retained the memories of his past life. At first, he was utterly stunned by this endless cycle of reincarnation. However, he soon grew ecstatic and began to relish his unique advantage. After all, being reborn with his memories intact was a tremendous privilege. Whatever he desired became attainable, and people revered him, leading him to fall into a grand illusion. He began to see himself as something akin to a god, believing that while the world and his name changed, only his form was altered, and life simply went on indefinitely. Eventually, this fool grew profoundly weary of it all. He thought, what good would it do to save the world? He would just have to start over in another one, so why bother accumulating wealth? He would simply begin from scratch once more. Love was pointless as well, for he was destined to lose it all. In time, the privilege of his perpetual reincarnation twisted into a curse that devoured his soul from within. He descended into a severe apathy, losing interest in everything, and instead of creating and enjoying life, he began to fight and destroy, becoming ever more immersed in his own destructive whims. He himself became a blight upon the world. After wasting countless years, he finally had an epiphany, realizing that he was just an ordinary man who just happened to live a very long time. An immense fatigue washed over him, and he wished to send it all to oblivion, for even after all those years, the meaning of life remained as elusive as ever. Recalling this tale, Arl also swore his love. With his vows spoken, the priest pronounced them husband and wife, and in that moment, the man realized you must do what you want, eat what you desire, and love whom you choose to love. Was that not the greatest truth of all? The guests were overjoyed for the young couple, and Arl had come to depend on Fina, the anchor in this new life he was given after being reborn. She smiled and confessed she relied on him too. With that, the groom swept his bride into his arms and carried her away. Historians now believe that the era of Aurella Eresia witnessed the most profound changes in history since the Empire's inception. Had it not been for him, the Empire itself, besieged by the Undead Invasion and the war with the Holy Kingdom, may well have ceased to exist. Many of the industries he pioneered served as the very foundation of modern civilization. For this reason, scholars have since named him a sage, while some even speculated he did it all merely for his own amusement. This latter theory, however, never gained widespread acceptance. His lifelong research was carried on by his eldest daughter, Aurella Eresia. His other children also achieved great renown in their respective fields. In any event, Arl's arrival had a monumental impact on shaping the modern empire. This article was dedicated to the 1500th anniversary of the founding of the Arnesian Empire. The story will return.